Hey everyone, so welcome back to Girls on Key YouTube channel. We do videos about poetry for you guys. So as I said, I'm here with poet Melinda Smith from Canberra. We're here for the Newcastle Writers Festival, and today's book club is about this beautiful book, Goodbye Cruel. So luckily we have her here today to give us a reading. This was launched 1 year ago today at the Newcastle Writers Festival, so that's really special. And so she's going to do a reading for us, and then I'm going to ask her a few questions about the book.
Okay, so this one is called Leaves from the Lover's Almanac, and it's part of a longer series that I did. Each poem was inspired by a photograph taken by artist Rhonda Aliff, and some of them kind of came together in the same voice, and the ones that were all lovelorn came together in this poem called Leaves from the Lover's Almanac. Day 27. Hold me up to the light, read my disease. Day 28. I hover just above the idea of you. Day 33. Your breath, then mine. No argument yet. Day 49. You trail your vapour. My nebula reddens. Day 69. Brush my lips with bindi eye. Day 71. You have left me a blue hourglass to sift my blue hours. Day 130. When you pass, you leave flames in the strangest places. Day 139. Smitten by the struck match, I become a dumb candle. Day 147. I never said I would leave you unchanged. Day 148. I can still feel the glow in my backbone. Day 191. When you consume me, make all the air flower with ruin. Day 277. Here I am, broken open to a tiny carnival. Day 281. When I look at you, I see more than one thing burning. Day 362. Waiting for you, morning and night, the sea eats at me. Okay, I'm going to read a poem now that's from the central section of the book, which has got the same title as the book, Goodbye Cruel. So that central section of the book deals with the theme of suicide. So that's a kind of content warning on these two pieces. This poem is, it's actually, I don't know if you can see it, but it's kind of laid out in a particular way on the page, which can reflect what's going on in the poem. It's somebody trying to make a decision, and then eventually the decision is made, and then the consequences flow. There will be time for the last walk in the garden, for the spears of lavender, for the little half-hearted yellow roses. There will be time to snip a handful of stems, to bear them gently into the cool kitchen, to place them just so in the slim, chipped vase. There will be quiet into which will fall small pebbles of sound, the neat chirp of the door locking, the wobble of the fruit bowl set down on the table, the flesh of the last nectarine coming away from the stone like fabric tearing. There will be reasons without number, reasons to stop every one impeccable. There will be a trapped moth beating its soft dust of panic onto the high curtain. There will be pain. There will be light flaring along the windowsill. There will be nausea, which for once will be precisely as bad as it feels. There will be the blur of the wrong focal length, of looking too closely through a fly screen. Inhale. There will be a sense of something almost becoming clear, resolving, a faint scent of rosemary. Exhale. There will be a feeling of coming apart, petal by petal, dropping and scattering, strewing the clean tablecloth. There will be peace and infinite understanding, buzzing on the wrong side of the pain, but then there will be no more time. There's another one from this sequence, which is a slightly more positive one. This is about to be translated into Japanese, actually, which I'm very excited about. But it comes from the story of Don Ritchie, who was a man who, just a kind of everyday guy who had a day job in sales, and he lived near the Gap on Sydney's South Head, which is a place that's, if you're not from Sydney, it's a place that's kind of renowned as somewhere to go if you're thinking about ending your life, because it's quite a big, dramatic drop off the cliff into the sea. And Don Ritchie made it his other job to try and start conversations with people who were hanging around the cliff tops looking like they might be thinking about jumping. And his family thinks that he saved somewhere between 160 and 400 people, or at least, you know, started a conversation that ended in them not jumping that particular day. So this is called Contemplating the Gap, and it's in memory of Don Ritchie. Every story stumbles in its own way, all so far from here and from each other. The funnel has a wide mouth, but one by one they slide down it to teeter on the lip of this one exit, staring at the heave of the sea, breath beaten from them by the cliff wind. You can't just sit there and watch through your window. Can I help you in some way? 160 times and I've never lost one. Sometimes they come for a cuppa afterwards. They tell me things. They tell me you feel the pull in your guts and your giddy head. There is an urge to laugh and an urge to launch into the moor, to make gravity finish all at once the dirty, dragging work it started the day you were born. They tell me you only feel vertigo when you don't want to fall. Can I help you in some way? Most of them come back with no. I'm a salesman though. No is a beginning.
So I just wanted to ask you about the genesis of the book, starting with the title, Goodbye Cruel. Obviously there's a couple of meanings there, so do you want to talk to us a bit about that?
I'm very happy to, Anna. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome.
On the book club, and yeah, it's a privilege to be part of the Girls on Key family.
Thank you.
As it were. So the book, it expanded outward from that central section, which is all poems on the theme of suicide. And the way that I generally work is I'll write away for a little while, just let myself write and let myself write what comes, and eventually it'll be clear to me that there's a theme emerging in what I'm writing, and then I'll construct a book around that. And I'd written a few poems, and then I wrote that one that I read, Contemplating the Gap, about Don Ritchie. Yes. And that was the one that made me realise that it was actually a sequence that needed to come together around suicide.
I see.
And so, I put that together. And why that topic is, I suppose, because I have an acquaintance with it without having been directly burned by it, as it were. So I have a number of people in my circle who've talked about leaving us, and none of them have yet been successful. So I have this real kind of feeling that it's an urgent thing because I don't think it's something that I would be able to write about if anybody close to me actually managed to go through with it. And I'm being aware as part of negotiating those conversations with those people that a great big silence opens up around the subject, and we don't talk about it, and we don't have a language for talking about it in a way that is helpful. We just kind of step quietly away and try and pretend that it's not happening. And I thought, well, why don't I just try and write into that space and see what happens? And so that's where the idea for those poems came from.
Right, and it's interesting because poetry, and as is all art, is often a conversation, and it's a place to sort of talk about, as you say, some things that as a society we find difficult. We can make art as a way to converse about those topics. So that's the power of poetry, isn't it? And so in your process of putting the collections together, how was it for you emotionally? You know, what was that like? Dealing with that subject matter?
It varied. Yeah, it varied. I mean, I did tread quite carefully, and I was careful to use stories that were kind of at one remove from things that were happening in my immediate circle. So there are actually quite a lot of poems in there that are inspired by other works of fiction or films or pieces of art, as well as things that are closer to home. And the closer to home things aren't really overt, they're kind of just woven into the other poems. But I mean, there's a particular poem in there that people often ask me about because it's in the first person, and that's something I do a lot in my work. I take on a lot of different voices, and most of them are nothing like my voice or nothing like my experience, but the first person, the lyric I, is a very easy and quick way to connect emotionally with the audience for the poem. And there's a poem in there about a child whose mother takes them to kindergarten and then goes to a friend's house and locks all the doors and windows and gasses herself. And then the child growing up and finding out kind of a little bit more about that afterwards. And the I in that poem is not me, it's actually based on an autobiography of a man, Jeremy Gavron, who lost his mother in a similar way. But I've kind of interpolated things into that incident that aren't from his life either. So I found that was a way to engage with the material without it being too draining, going there day after day.
And because how long was it from the beginning through to the publication, you know, putting it together? How long was the process?
Quite long. I mean, the book before that came out in 2013, and 2014 was just a rough year. There was various things happening, and I didn't do a lot of writing that year. So it was basically 2015, 2016, so 2 years basically writing. And then I should actually thank the Bundanon Trust, because the book finally came together during a residency at Bundanon in the middle of in May 2016, and then it took a while to go through the publication process, and then it was launched a year ago this weekend at the Newcastle Writers Festival in 2017.
Where we are at the moment. And I'm interested with the concrete poetry that you put in here. So is that something that you'd like to explore more, or you've had an interest in? What's your interest with that stuff, stylistic kind of poetry?
I'm interested in keeping on experimenting with different formats for poems, and I do. Because I'm based in the ACT, and the ACT creative community is quite small, so it's quite easy to work with people in other disciplines, and I do a lot of collaborating with visual artists I collaborate with dancers and musicians and stuff, and we do stuff for arts festivals and events down there. But the collaboration with artists has made me think a lot about how a poem looks on the page and what you can do just with the shape of things. So I suppose that's where some of that experimentation is coming through.
Thank you. And you read a sequence which was from an Instagram collaboration of photography, and were you able to tell us a bit more, because we didn't get to hear kind of a bit more about that?
Yeah,
so, we'll put a link as well.
I would love you to put a link down below for so that first sequence that I read, The Lover's Almanac, was actually from a poet artist or a poet photography collaboration I did with Rhonda Aliff, who's I know through her connections to the ACT arts world, but she's actually herself based in Cobargo, or a farm at Sam's Creek near Cobargo down near Bega on the south coast of New South Wales. And we actually, both of us had the same kind of difficulty happened in our family in 2014. Both of our eldest sons were diagnosed with the same illness.
Oh, wow.
And we found that impacted our creative process in similar ways, in that it just made it quite difficult to keep producing at the same rate.
Yeah.
So Rhonda decided that just for that year she was just going to take a photograph of the sky, one photograph every single day, and she called it the Look Up Project.
Okay.
And then I followed along on her blog and was watching the beautiful photographs of the sky around Bega, and I found them very kind of just nourishing to look at. And you know, we felt quite a strong connection to each other because of the personal kind of circumstances. And so I ended up approaching her and saying, look, I'd love to write poems about poems to these photographs, and I don't know what the end result might look like, but as a daily practice I think it would be really helpful. And of course she was doing the photos religiously every day, and the photo, the value of the photo came from, you know, this was this date and this was this date, and by the end she had 365.
Yeah, so she did it for a whole year.
For a whole year. And I didn't really do it a poem a day. I would treat them a bit like crochet squares, and I'd have like 10 or 11 or 12 kind of bank up, and then I'd find a cafe and sit down and do a whole bunch of the little micro poems. Generally the first drafts weren't that great, so they went through quite a lot of editing before we actually ended up putting them all together. So it was actually the following year when we finally had the whole lot of them that we did. We turned them into we first turned them into a film.
Oh, really?
It's just like a PowerPoint show basically, with captions, and so it was shown at an arts festival in Canberra, projected on the roof with cushions underneath, so people could go and lie down, look at these beautiful photographs of the sky, and then we had like a caption, the poem words come in a little bit after you saw the original image. And the idea that we came to was that each poetic caption would make you look at the sky in a new way. And so we had sky and then words, and then they stayed there together for a little while, and then the sky melted away and the words were there, and then the next one would happen.
Oh, that's so cool, isn't it?
Yeah, and the whole show went for kind of 90 minutes.
Did it? Yeah.
And then they became postcards, and then in 2017 we thought we'll just put them up on Instagram, one every day. So that was its next manifestation, and we haven't done a lot with it since then, but you please go and check out the Instagram feed. So all the photographs are there, and the poems are in the Instagram captions on that Look Up project.
Because it's a daily thing, did you find that it was hard to sort of find a new angle on, because the sky is the sky.
The sky is the sky.
You know, how did you?
Yeah, I suppose the sky is the sky, but it's a different colour, because she took them at different times of day. It's different colours at different times of day. She didn't take them from the same spot every day. So there are bits of different trees intruding in the photographs. Sometimes there are buildings. Sometimes there are, you know, power lines going across, or you know, or the daylight moon is there, or the, you know, it's clearly a sunrise or a sunset. And very often, occasionally, because she's at Bega, you know, she was at the beach, so there'd be like a bit of sand or rocks or whatever intruding into the photograph. So
some cheese.
No cheese, absolutely no cheese. But there was plenty there to work with, and it was an interesting thing. You know, how I responded to the photograph obviously also depended on where I was in the day, what had been happening for me creatively and personally. And so quite a number of different voices emerged through that project. There was a lovelorn voice. There was a really cantankerous kind of grumpy voice that I christened Hanrahan, after that old nursery rhyme, or that old Irish song, We'll All Be Ruined, said Hanrahan. And that Hanrahan has a collection in Goodbye Cruel as well, called Days of Hanrahan. So there's some more of the grumpy poems in there. And then there were a couple more kind of thankful and philosophical voices that didn't end up, those poems didn't work without their images, which is why they're not in the book, but you can look at them all on Instagram and see how they work.
And that's a really interesting point. How do you like exploring different voices? You know, is that something that you're interested in, and have you done any kind of theatre writing or novel writing exploring characterisation? Or
I have a couple of screenplays in the bottom drawer, and I do like. I think with voice, just with a quote from a particular character that's in a character in a situation, you can just convey so much. So as a poet, I often salt little bits of dialogue through my poems, because it's so, if you're careful with it, it's such an economical way to convey a lot.
I agree.
And I love playing with that. And I don't enjoy spending too much time in my own head. I like to get into other people's heads. And so I think that's another way in, is to try and find their voices and communicating their voices, being respectful and careful about how you do that when they're real people, for example.
Yes. Well, I mean, one of the pitfalls, I guess, and people ask about this a lot, is have you had people thinking that a poem is autobiographical when it's not? Have you had that situation where people read into it that this is your story?
This is my story.
How do you navigate? Because a lot of people do see poetry as being autobiographical automatically, and it's hard to sort of explain that it's fiction. You know, do you get that?
Yeah. No, I do, and I have a couple of different responses. One is, of course, it's natural because most poems written with a lyric eye are actually connected to the poet in some way.
And it's through your own voice and your own thoughts as well. So it's filtered through that, obviously.
Yeah, but so it's a natural response in the reader to think that that's actually the poet speaking from their heart about their own life. But I exhausted my own life as material quite a long time ago.
You're getting all the secrets here, guys. You're getting all the secrets.
So that's not actually my life in there. But as I said, I like to borrow the lyric I as an emotional kind of cattle prod. Isn't that terrible?
No.
Because for me, poetry is about connecting on an emotional level, and a lot of what I think about as kind of unfashionable and daggy in my work is just it has a very heavy reliance on emotion. And I just don't care anymore. I'm just happy. This is clearly what I do, so I'm just going to keep doing that, and people can think it's daggy or whatever. But so I understand. I'm playing with fire, taking that lyric I and using it to speaking voices that aren't my own. But also, I'd like people to give the poet some credit for technique and artistry and working with the material. So anyway, but I'm not angry with people when they do that. But I do put footnotes in the back of my book to say, by the way, this is not, this is where this poem comes from, just in case you were wondering and you were thinking I needed to be calling some help hotlines myself, for example.
Well, I mean, that's the other thing, is that you pay homage to, for example, with the story of what was his name?
Don Ritchie.
Yeah. So, this is a way he's obviously passed now, so being able to tell that story and those kind of things, particularly around this topic, are quite powerful. And this book is quite powerful. I do recommend it very highly, and not just in that sense, but in terms of the work itself. So please do pick up a copy, and thank you so much, Melinda, for being on our show. And
thank you.
And
we'll so much for having me, Anna.
Pop Melinda's links, and I'm just going to get her to quickly say a few words about her event that she runs in Canberra for those of you who are in the area.
Oh, thank you. I love being able to plug stuff like that. I should just mention also that I did actually get Don Ritchie's family's permission to publish that poem. Beautiful. Because it was clearly something that you wouldn't do without asking. Onto the plug. So I somehow seem to have got on the organising committee for a series of poetry readings that is on every Monday night in Canberra at a venue we have there called Smith's Alternative, which is a kind of cafe, bar, performance space right in the centre of the city across from the GPO. And so every Monday night from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. we have a poetry event on there. We generally have 2 poets and an open mic section, and 2018 is already totally full. We're going to have Anna come and read for us very soon, and we've had a number of wonderful poets come through, and we're going to keep having them come through. But 2019 we've just got confirmation that we can do 2019, and we haven't started booking people for 2019 yet, but I'm quite keen to bring lots of different styles of poetry together. Fantastic. Because that cross-pollinates the audience. So we generally try and have either an out-of-towner and a local, or a page poet and a stage poet together. Great. And it's a lovely, we like to think of it as a very positive, welcoming space. Although there's an open mic, it's not a competitive slam environment. There's no kind of scoring or anything like that. It's just very strictly timed. Do your thing in 3 minutes. Sit down.
Cool. So if you haven't read before and you want to get up on the open mic, please go along if you're in the area. And it's fantastic.
We'd love to have you.
So we'll pop the links to that below as well.